Well, let's go ahead and get started. Introduce Dr. Virginia Parks, the Labor Center's faculty director, who will be a moderator for the panel.
First, I think we should all give Abigail a big round of applause. What an amazing film. But first, I think that we have some Disney workers in the house, and I would love it if they would stand up. And let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy lives to, I think, really honor us with your presence, because this movie is clearly about them and it's about all of us, right? With that, so I'll just introduce our panelists. So we have Abigail, and now I've got lights. Abigail Disney and Dr. Seth Pipkin, who's a colleague of mine, and Matt Bell, who's the Secretary Treasurer of UFCW, local, and now I want to say the 7-1, and I'm forgetting, so 324, thank you, and Artemis Bell, who is a clearly star of the film. So, Artemis, I'd like to start with you. So you share so much with us about your experience working at Disneyland and the challenges you faced, and I'm really struck by your courage and your vulnerability in all of this. And you made me realize the profound grace of Gwendolyn Brooks' quote at the beginning of the film: "We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond." And so what has this film meant for you personally, and what do you hope that we take away from it?
Okay. I mean, I have like so many feelings about the time when we were filming, and like every time I see this film, I kind of like think about things in a slightly different way, both from like changing times. But like what this film means to me personally, like I agreed to be involved because like I wanted to help the union, and I felt getting the story out and trying to shine a light on the reality of the company that is so well loved. I felt that that was important, and I felt that that would help our goals as a union. As far as like what I hope we take from it, like the last couple of days, I've been seeing a lot of like stuff about how important it is to build community, and I just kind of like that resonated with me. And it, like coming back to the film, like none of what we've succeeded in doing during this film or since this film has been without community. And I feel that it's very important to really value our communities. And I feel that it's important that we acknowledge that it takes a bit of work to build and sustain healthy communities. So I hope that like what people take from this film is how important a community is to making any kind of forward progress.
I'm going to put you on the spot. I didn't share this question with you, but can you just tell us a little bit about what that work is? Like really, like what does it take to build community? And I'm looking for just like the real work, not the big lofty ideas. Like what does that mean?
I mean, that is a challenging question, but because it changes a little bit in every situation, and it changes a little bit with every individual. So I think building community requires a certain amount of flexibility and openness to everyone. But I think it also, like nobody wants community to be hard work. Nobody wants making friends to be hard work. But the reality is it takes a little bit of effort. And the thing that, while I wasn't always perfect, the thing that I always brought with me to like my union work and to work at Disney was that I was sincerely there just to try to help people, and I really wanted to make everything better. So for me, like my sincerity helped kind of build that community, but it might be a little bit different for every person because we all bring different things to the table. But I think bringing your whole self to the table and being as honest about it as possible is an important part of building community.
Well, thanks so much. I think we learned a lot from you in that film about what that means. And I mean, those images of the car line waiting to pick up food and the food bank and people working after hours. And it's really profound. And thank you. So I'm going to move to Abigail next. I have two questions for you. So you say in the film, having a last name Disney is like having a weird superpower you didn't ask for. But you made a very deliberate and courageous decision to wield that weird superpower. And so what gave you, I know you said you got a message from Ralph, but I'm going to guess it was a little bit more. Like, what gave you that initial courage and what continued to give you that courage, especially as you came under great fire from critics and very lofty public spaces like Congress and then in social media? So what did it take?
Well, it helps when somebody who's yelling at you in Congress is kind of an idiot. So that's fun. But you know, I've done a lot of work in film with women in war zones, and I worked with an evangelical Christian minister who decided to buck his community around gun policy because he was an abortion activist and he really believes every life is sacred, and he didn't understand how that meshed with the policies on gun control. So I've worked with really courageous people and admired them incredibly. And so I just really feel like I owe it to myself. I owe it to my world. I owe it because, you know, I was granted so much that I didn't earn to be as courageous as that. And it's, yeah, I don't enjoy Twitter when they're really piling on, but at the same time, nobody that matters to me is thinking any less of me. So that's kind of what I hold on to.
That's something that we can all think about, I think. Thank you so much. And then the question that I did ask you just now, if I could ask, because I'm dying to hear your answer. This film came out in 2022. What is its relevance right now, today?
Yeah. Well, I was watching those end cards wishing I could change them because we're going to hear about the contract that they just negotiated, which is a stellar contract. So definitely, you know, the small goal was to affect Disney management and to get it through their thick heads that it actually mattered that human beings were working for them and unable to feed their families. So that was job one. Job two was to kind of push back on this kind of conception that, you know, business people are the smartest people in the world and they know how to do everything and we should rely on them for everything. Don't think that's true. That's not been my experience. And it was important to like dip into all the wisdom that was there at the level of the workers and all of the wisdom and the capacity to work together, show up with all of yourself, be flexible for everybody else there and so forth. It's so relevant now because no matter your political persuasion, the country is not in a good place. I mean, I'm saying this truly. I'm not being coy about my politics. Hate Donald Trump. There, you know, now you know. But no matter what your politics are, I think we all can agree that the level of division and unkindness, even up to the level of sadism, that goes into some of what's happening right now is deeply troubling. And what a union is at its essence, among the many things that it is a group of people mutually caring about each other and the well-being of those people as a group and the other people at the company and elsewhere over the long term. Putting aside their immediate self-interest, maybe they have to pick their kids up at school, maybe they're tired, maybe, and yet still getting together and doing it. That's the job we all have right now. And I'm not talking about just showing up at protest, although those things will matter. But we need to heal the ruptures. And if you don't learn how to care about someone that you ordinarily wouldn't be friends with, which is what also you have to do in a union, right? You don't choose everybody there. If you don't learn how to do that, we'll never heal the horrible fissures in this country. So I do think that the more time we spend watching people effectively do that, the better for us. And we have, progress is made. I mean, it's up, what, $24 an hour now? And it was $11.25 when I started the film. So yeah, that people's lives are very materially different because of that. And so people need to know this works.
Thank you. Queued me up to talk to labor. And we've got a few unions in the house. So we have SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. And we also have the United Food and Commercial Workers. And so I want to ask Matt, so your members are mostly in the retail stores at Disneyland, yes, and then we have other unions, SEIU represents a lot of the, well, you
And there's
represent the
a new
custodial.
union, since, I don't know if anybody's here from it, for the people working in the characters.
Exactly, thank you. So there are a number of different unions at Disneyland. We've asked Matt to come because you represent a union that's also part of a coalition that will bargain with Disneyland. And can you just share with us what's happened at Disneyland and what's the situation for workers and how has it changed since Abigail made the film?
Yeah, so the coalition that we bargain with is called Master Services. It's actually like 4 unions together that bargain. It's UFCW, it's USWW, SEIU, it's Teamsters, and Candy Makers. And we bargain together, and it makes up about 14,000 cast members at both DCA, Downtown Disney, or Disney California Adventure, Downtown Disney, and Disneyland. And we took a different approach this negotiations because there's a lot of unions out at the park, a lot of unionized members, but Master Services this time around approached it differently. And the way that we approached it was to organize these workers, that it was, we wanted to build leadership among the workers and to kind of get rid of this third party narrative of the union is like people like me. The union is the workers, and to really empower the workers and put a plan together and make the workers a central piece of that plan to change. And at the end of the day, yes, it is about money, but it's really about power, and to change the power dynamic out at the park. And this contract, we were able to do that, and it took a year-long planning and working with workers. I see some of my brothers and sisters out here that we were working with to organize 14,000 members. And one of the assumptions that comes with a lot of unions looking at Disney workers is that Disney workers won't stand up and rise up and fight against Disney. They enjoy working there. They love the park. But that is not the case. So we came in with this idea that no, workers, we need to spend a lot of time organizing these workers, bringing them together. And over a period of time, we put organizers in the park, developed leaders in the park, worked with our bargaining committee, and managed to get a contract. And we took a strike vote. We actually had a rally where we marched. It was like 1,000 cast members marched to the gates of Disney. And we took a strike vote right after and got a 99% strike vote. And it really demonstrated to Disney that the power dynamic had changed. And result of that was we got one of the most historic contracts that the cast members have ever gotten. We got a $6 wage increase over 3 years. It was $4 out the gate. And so it wasn't because of the negotiating skills of those at the table. It was a realization by probably went all the way up to the CEO that these workers were willing to take it to the street if they had to. And there was a lot of strategy in how we put this together. But at the end of the day, it was the workers actually gaining power and putting their power to use. And Disney had to reconcile that. And it came to a point where they realized they couldn't. And they turned around and gave probably the most historic contract that we've ever gotten. And what was nice to see was, at the end of the day, when we voted this contract in, the bargaining committee, the workers that actually negotiated this contract, that sat at the table, were the heroes of the story. I've never seen so many hugs, so many congratulations to the workers that put their time and effort into this, and rose up against a $200 billion company and made them realize that they had to respect them. We still have a lot of work to do. I think the living wage in Orange County has to be like $32. So there's still quite a bit of work to do, but I think one of the main things that came out of this campaign was that the power is different now. That there was a Disney button, I don't know if any of you have seen it, a little Mickey fist, that was used during this campaign, and that the workers really took ownership of that. And it changed the power dynamic where the workers actually were challenging their managers. They were challenging, the supervisors on the ground level, and it really flipped the dynamic. And it was at that moment that I think the executives realized they had a crisis on their hands, and it resulted in this contract.
Matt, can you talk a little bit about Measure L?
Yes, I'd love to talk about Measure L. That was in 2018. Some of the unions got together, we call it the CRLU, it's a coalition of resort labor unions got together. And I think you could see, it's Peter Dreyer was in there in the film from the Economic Roundtable, helped us put a white paper together to kind of give a reality of what was happening at Disney. And from that, we actually put a initiative on the ballot in Anaheim that anyone in the resort area that took a tax subsidy had to pay a minimum wage, a set minimum wage. Disney fought that tooth and nail. And really what it was stuck to was, and I think you heard in the film, the parking structure where they paid $1 to rent it. And we went through all the courts. When I say we, it was some attorneys that really took the case on and ultimately won. And so now Measure L has a pay rate of $20, I believe, and 42 cents. But the greatest thing is out of this, there's a settlement that has come. Probably it is the largest wage and hour settlement in the state of California. It's like $233 million Disney has to pay in back pay for the wages that are owed to these workers. So they're going to get all their back pay, 10% interest, the 401k contributions that were owed, 10% interest on that. It is an incredible back pay settlement that these cast members that have got, even those that have left the park, are going to get this. I think May 20th, they're going to be notified of that. So I think it is the second largest wage and hour settlement in the country, next to a Walmart one, but in the state of California is the largest wage and hour settlement ever. And so it was the labor unions that got together to put that on the ballot, but it was the cast members that themselves that went door to door knocking to the residents of Anaheim to get that passed. Took quite a few years. The courts are not the fastest, but I would call that one a complete victory for the workers.
It's a different idea or a different scale of collective action, and I think it's really powerful when you see what we, the public, can do as well to really raise standards and living conditions for our neighbors, right? People who we live with in this great county of Orange County. So I'm going to go to my colleague, Seth, and you study the relationship between government and business, and I know there's a number of ways, I'm sure you're thinking about this, but I just want to ask what you take away from the film and how do you think about it in a context like ours right now? And I mean that in different ways. Now, this moment, and now this space, right? A screening of Abigail's film on a university campus to an audience of workers, students, faculty, university staff and administrators, labor leaders, former government representatives, hi Katie, and aspiring. And what does it mean for us, this relationship between government and business?
Sure, I'll hold it, thank you. I can offer a little impression on that in an attempt to kind of reinforce what the people who are here are doing and probably can do. I was jotting down little notes as I saw the movie, which I very much enjoyed. It went darker and bleaker than I expected it to, but for very good reasons and in very ways that were very incisive and informative. I appreciated that. And one of the themes that came up for me in it was the notion that the CEO of Disney might even be a nice guy, but he himself can't bring himself to change these rules, even in a very profitable company that has more than enough resources to pay the workers this, as recent lawsuits and other actions show. But he can't bring himself to do it, and the word that seemed to emerge was conformity. And then the movie goes into a very long backstory of American economic and political history, which I won't recapitulate now, but I'll just mention that I think that this story of macro level change is necessary to explain why we see this kind of conformity to a system that isn't functioning in a way we might expect or want it to for workers. And that when we have a space here, when a film like this is made and people from labor unions, their representatives, the workers in the union, people from the university, I think it is a space to think about and try to share ideas about possible alternatives. For me, a key word for the alternatives is actually discipline. I really appreciated the history of the New Deal and its kind of dissolution over the decades. I teach that in many of my classes. At the same time, I think that the New Deal was a really complex web of lots of different forms of discipline coming from many different places that ultimately put actors, whether they were CEOs or workers, in a specific set of expectations about their roles and obligations to each other. And so I would just, without attempting to get pretentious or professorial, or maybe I already have, but without going too far out on a limb with that, I would just say that I could imagine this being a space where alternative sources of discipline could be formulated. And I think it's important to think down below that level of those big macro structures of the New Deal reinforcing unions from the national level. And I thought it was fantastic to hear about the successful organizing and litigation that created different relationships, working between a union, a city, state level courts. I think it's really important to think creatively across institutions in that way. And that's something I see in my own research. I research developing countries and the US. I research states in Mexico. And states in Mexico that bring labor to the table often are much more successful in their ability to solve economic problems, to keep workers trained, to keep them in their jobs, to give them opportunities to have greater skills. And so I think that there are a lot of opportunities to learn across institutional settings and more leverage from the local up to higher levels of government than we tend to think. The New Deal was built out of a lot of state level and local policies.
I want to add to that. I just returned from the happiest place on earth, and it's not Disneyland. It's a country called Finland. And while I was there, they wanted me to speak about rising economic inequality. Well, not rising, they're astounded by how the vast distance between those people at the top, right, and workers at the bottom. And they're very worried about that in their own country. And yet, even when I spoke there, it was a space with representatives from Parliament responding to my comments, representatives from labor, representatives from business, right? It really was about a shared conversation and a shared commitment, right, to making their country one of the happiest places on earth. And it's happy, not because they're all walking around happy, it's happy because people have free college education, they have healthcare, they can afford homes, they have public transit, they're protecting their environment, they're thinking about a clean energy transition. And that's what we hope to do in spaces like this. And we just really want to thank Abigail for giving us that opportunity to do that. So I want us to give one more round of applause to everybody on the panel and Abigail. And then we have enough time for a few questions from the audience, and I think we have a microphone that can be passed around.
Hi. I just wanted to observe in the midst of this powerful human story that you tell, there's also an interesting story about law and the lack thereof. So after finishing my time in Congress, I'm back teaching at the law school, and they asked me what I wanted to teach. And what I said was, I want to teach corporations, the law that forms and governs what corporations can and cannot do, the benefits that they get. Because at the end of the day, that law is what makes all of this possible. And it really, like the idea, like one of the biggest problems we face that this movie and the story that you're telling afterwards about what you all have accomplished is that it is not actually inevitable or correct that corporations have an obligation to make all the money they possibly can and give it all to their shareholders as fast as they possibly can. And we have a real problem in America with like a pinched imagination about what the law that governs workers and labor and the duties of a corporation. So I think corporations do have duties to their shareholders, but I also think they have duties to their employees, to their community, to their suppliers. Like that is part of it too. And I just think the power of the success you've had here is really important at a time in which people keep saying to me, what can we do? And I think the answer here is we can do exactly this. We can tell the story that Abigail told by lifting up the voices of the people who are willing to be in this movie, and then we can organize around it. So I just want to say, like, I think people need to see these kinds of successes because they are so wedded to this inevitability. And I wonder if you heard that back, Abigail, as you were speaking out. The way that people were talking to you, I've had some of the same experience, which is like, this can't be right. Of course they're entitled to make everything. How could you dare imagine a different regime? And it's not even imagining. It actually is the regime, and this is the perversion of it.
Yeah, when I get feedback from people who have nothing to do with Disney, am I? Okay. I get this exactly what you're saying there. It's like, I had no idea we could be so successful. This is what organizing looks like. You know, now I understand what we need to do back at this place or that place. I was really happy in that the character, the people who are in the character outfits formed a union after seeing this film, because they were people who were just completely disregarded. They weren't covered by any of the labor protections. And, you know, people are vomiting into their cup. It's really bad. And they get really mistreated. And it's if you could imagine it on a 110-degree day, it's kind of a nightmare. So for them to organize, I'll just say, my experience of Disney workers is they are some of the best people on the planet. They really and truly are, because they'll go to work every day in the same way that a teacher or a nurse or a fireman does, because they believe they're doing a good thing in this world by making Disneyland the special place that it is. They're like sacred. You know, they're doing God's work. And to be abusive of them is such a shock to me. And the folks in the character costumes, I've always experienced them be the most enthusiastic, you know, lovers of Disney. So the idea that they finally organized, it was hard to organize Disney workers, as you say, because they felt like they were turning on this company they loved so much. But there was also this feeling everywhere I looked of betrayal. You know, it's like your own mother is saying, no, you can't have enough money to buy enough food for your family. And so there was like kind of a weird emotional, even spiritual hesitance to admit that this company was treating them so badly. So yeah, I get a lot of feedback about seeing an organizing success and what that empowers in other people. I love that so much.
Hello, thank you for the screening. I'd like to preface my question by saying I don't know anything about business or economics, so this is just like random things I was thinking about. So in terms of like making substantial change that perhaps has like a cascading effect where in like the corporate hierarchy, where federally, at the state level, like what needs to move to create a longer lasting change? Because it seems like workers' wages have increased as a result of negotiations, but I don't know if that necessarily means that the CEOs, shareholders, or whoever's at the top of the food chain actually took a cut in response to that. So like, does the wealth, if the CEOs took a cut, would the wealth actually trickle down? Or is it just like, I don't know, just wealth held in stocks or whatever?
Yeah.
Or would the change have to happen at the federal level? Because it seems as though the social contract has changed because regulation has been scaled back. So I was just wondering like where, like cost of living in
Yes, such a
California is so
great
high.
question. Yeah.
So I was like wondering like where does the change need to happen for something to actually become more substantial?
So the first rule is wealth almost never trickles down. Like it just doesn't. And so like I think we've well lived past the total disproving and the evaluation of that mythology. But like there are a lot of parts to this. I mean, I'm very interested in social narratives. Social narratives power a lot of what we get, just the expectations people have. And, you know, it's such a hard thing. We get it from the air, it's in the magazines, it's in the TV shows. I mean, we pick up a shared narrative. And the shared narrative has been, ever since 1980, when Reagan took office, that this is an individualistic society, highest value is self-reliance, and that businesses were all about making money and nothing but, and that would benefit shareholders and then wealth would trickle down. And so we know that's not what's happening. And Disney in the years leading up to the pandemic spent, I'm going to get the number wrong, but something like $80 billion of profit on share buybacks, not on their employees. And share buybacks is when they buy back the shares, which drives up the share price, and so shareholders get richer. That is a way of rewarding. And 10% of people own 95% of shares. So you're benefiting only the top 10% of, so the public narrative has to change and we have to figure out how to do this. If you really do sit down and read the Pell memo, it's online, you could Google it, it's a really interesting document to read. But there's a huge amount of emphasis on capturing the media and changing the narrative. So I'm not just sort of weaving a story that we lefties love. It's true that narratives totally give you what you end up getting. So we have to attack the cultural narrative. We have to make sure that we understand that wealth doesn't trickle down, and we have to change Wall Street. I mean, it really is coming from Wall Street. And you can measure the difference from 1980 until today. You can see the way attitudes and behaviors have completely changed from CEOs. And the benevolent CEO, like my grandfather, has completely disappeared from the scene. There are a few, the Costco CEO, for instance. There are a few. And he gets punished by Wall Street all the time. Wall Street hates that guy. So, you know, if Bob turned around and turned it all into a living wage tomorrow, he'd be out in a hurry. So the real higher power is Wall Street. And we need, you know, and the business schools and the business media and the way they talk about things. It's a lot of moving parts. It's hard not to feel powerless. But honestly, when they first reached out to me and I said, well, that's too big. I can't help you with that. I mean, what are you talking about? I can't. And then I had to say to myself, there's not nothing I can do. You know, and that's the thing we all need to do is like, we all have a thing. It may be small, it may be large. You're not going to solve the whole problem with your one thing. But if everybody did their one thing, then we'd have something.
I'm wondering if Matt wants to speak to this, because I'm just thinking about the story you just told us, and it's about organizing at your workplace, organizing with your coworkers, but that carried further, right, out into the political sphere and into the sphere of government and policy.
Yeah, I think there's a general anger among workers nowadays. And kind of it's been hijacked by this populist kind of, we see that at you know, the federal level. But I think what's happening is workers generally across the United States feel left out, and they are left out. And a lot of them feel voiceless. And I think kind of what we saw happen in November is they kind of voted in anger. That's kind of what we resulted. However, there's other ways of looking at it, and I think our success at Disney is one way of looking at it, where workers were upset, but came together to have a universal voice and work together tactically and strategically to take on a $200 billion company and affect change. But you can also take that, and one of the things that we've seen in, I don't want to call it, well, the aftermath, but in the time since we've won that contract, is some of our Disney cast members have become more active than they've ever been in the past. They've taken a peek behind the curtains and felt what that power feels like when workers come together and are working to enact policy. They've done precinct walking. They're getting engaged at the local level, at the state level, at the county level, and actually having a voice in what kind of policies we would like to see throughout, government, whether it's, state minimum wages for certain sectors or some of the things that we've done, UFCW, is hazard pay for grocery workers during, during COVID. So getting workers involved and getting them to feel their power dynamic shift, I think is something that the CEOs are terrified of. And it's been kind of co-opted a little bit by this populist kind of feeling, with Trump and all that. But I think if workers have a voice and come together and actually can exercise that voice and be successful taking on a company, enacting policy and doing those things at the local level and actually changing laws, which Katie Porter was talking about, is not out of the realm of possibility, because there is such a huge divide between, the have and have-nots now in the United States. It is, I think it's most it's ever been. It's like, this is the kind of stuff that led to the French Revolution kind of thing. And it's at that level. And I think the thing that corporations are terrified of is workers actually organizing and workers coming together. And I think it's everyone's responsibility in this room to make sure that those things happen. And this is a space that we can have those conversations where it's not just workers, but academics, policymakers. These conversations need to happen, and they need to spill out and, be taught to other workers and students. And this is how you affect change, through ground level organizing.
I'll just say the happiest place on earth does exist. It's called Finland. And it's there, right? We have different models that we can look at, but I think we also have so much imagination and innovation, even just in this room, that we could really make a reality that's fairer and kinder and more compassionate happen. So I want to thank, again, Abigail, and thank my panelists, and thank all of you for coming.
All right. Thank you, everyone. A round of applause for our panelists and moderator again. Thank you, Abby, for making the trek out here, of course. And thank you, Artemis, for coming down as well. Really appreciate you guys coming down and joining us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope this was good for everyone as it was for us. And if you continue this discussion out as you engage your communities and workplaces and work and grow people power. Thank you again.